Hello everybody, welcome to WizardingAlice, welcome back if you are a subscriber. If you're new, hi, hello. This is the start of a new series maybe that I'm going to do on this channel that's basically just explaining the entire plot of Harry Potter, explaining who all the characters are, what happens in each book, all that sort of thing. It is based off the books, not the films. I'm getting that out there right now because that to me is the canon plot. Oh my god, I'm getting too excited already. So yeah, I'm gonna go over the entire plot, and this is designed for people who want a bit of a refresh of the Harry Potter plot. Maybe you've never read the books, you've only seen the films and would like to know what happens in the books, and maybe you're like me and would totally just watch something like this anyway, even though you know Harry Potter inside and out. I do anticipate I might get some new viewers watching this, so I just want to make it abundantly clear I am a Harry Potter fan. I think that's very clear. I read the books a lot, I watch the films a lot, I go to the studio tour. I love Harry Potter. Do not love the author. Well, that's not true. Daniel Radcliffe is the author and I think he's great, but JKR, we do not support on this channel. That being said, I get a lot of joy from Harry Potter, so I feel okay using the existing material that we have. I'm more than happy to go into more detail about that, but I don't want that to become this whole video. So I bought a whiteboard, guys. We are going to go through the entire plot of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone if you're nasty, but I'm not, so I go with Philosopher's Stone. Let's go. So scratch that, writing on the whiteboard in real time did not work. I'm gonna need a different setup. I'm gonna need a standing whiteboard. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk through the plot, and then as a sort of overlay thing, I will do what needs to be done on the whiteboard. Long story short. So we start with the Dursleys. They are the first family tree that we need to focus on. And there's the patriarch of the family, which is Vernon Dursley, and there's the matriarch, his wife, Petunia Dursley, and they have a baby boy son, and his name is Dudley Dursley. Okay, they live at 4 Privet Drive in Surrey, and the main thing you need to know about them is they are obsessed with being as normal as possible. They want to blend in, they want to be like everyone else, they want to be slightly better than everyone else, but they want to be like everyone else. They live on a house like every other house in the street, they drive a car, it's the same as everyone else's. They like being normal. They don't like anything abnormal. They don't like anyone who acts out of the ordinary. Not for them, right? And Vernon Dursley, he works at a drill sales company, drill supply company called Grunnings. That never ever comes up again. Apart from in book 2, never comes up again. So you don't really need to remember that. But he works at Grunnings. That's the main thing. Dudley, their son, he is spoiled. They think he is perfect. They think he could do no wrong in any way, and he's like a little brat basically. He's always misbehaving, but they're like, oh, it's just, we don't want someone who's all prissy, that kind of thing. They'll make an excuse for anything. One thing also to know before we go into the main plot is that Petunia has a sister, and her name is Lily, and she married her husband called James Potter. So Lily and James Potter, that is the second family tree. We have the Dursleys and we have the Potters, which are a connected family tree, I suppose. And they want nothing to do with them. At this point, we don't really know why, but all we know is that they do not speak to Lily and James. She has no relationship with her sister at this point. De nada. Okay, I think that means I don't know. Anyway, nada. So, I've got my plot here. When the story starts, Vernon goes to work, to Grunnings, and he notices as he goes throughout his day that there are people in the street dressed really strangely, dressed in robes, and they're just acting weird, like people are celebrating, people are whispering in groups. The whole thing is just very odd. And as you can imagine, Vernon doesn't like that. He's not a fan of things odd. He thinks everyone is stupid. He just wants to go about his day, yell at people at work. He's not none of the Dursleys are very nice. I think that's clear from this point on, but he just wants nothing to do with it, so he basically just ignores it. But the thing that really captures his attention is that he overhears the name Harry Potter from a group of these people who are talking, and that captures his attention because obviously his in-laws' last name is Potter, but he's pretty sure that they have a baby the same same age as Dudley, who's called Harry. So he's like, oh my god, that's the name of my nephew. Even though they don't talk to them anymore, it's still weird, right, to hear a family member's name. But again, he decides to dismiss it. Harry Potter is not the most unusual name in the world, so ignore, move on with his day. He even ends up going home at the end of the day and speaking to Petunia and saying, what's the name of your nephew again? And she's like, why the hell are you bringing this up? We don't talk about them. But it's like, yeah, his name's Harry. So that kind of gives Vernon like a sinking feeling, like, why are these weird people talking about potentially my nephew? But again, he's like, don't talk to them, don't care, it's just a weird situation on top of an already weird situation, right? So they go to bed and our perspective switches to the street at night, and an old, tall, bearded man in those kind of weird clothings enters the street, and his name is Albus Dumbledore. Very important character, but all you need to know at the moment is that his name is Albus Dumbledore, and that will kind of create our third tier, our family tree, if you will, of people like Hogwarts teachers and adults and things like that. I'll explain more about that later. But he comes down the street and he comes across a cat who's been there all day, and she transforms herself into a woman, our first sign of magic really, and her name is Minerva McGonagall. Can't spell her last name. She will be MM on any kind of visuals that you are seeing at this point. So she could transform herself freely from a cat into a person and vice versa. And they discuss that an evil person has killed Lily and James Potter and has tried to kill Harry Potter while he was at it. That's what everyone was talking about today. And he failed. He killed Lily and James, but he's failed to kill this little baby boy, and how weird this is and all that kind of thing. And this has left Harry with a lightning bolt scar on his forehead, but that's the only mark. And this is such a powerful evil wizard, he's killed so many, and yet he can't kill this little boy. It's strange. This led Voldemort as well to be really injured. The spell backfired somehow, and he's now gone into hiding. So everyone was celebrating today because Voldemort, for all intents and purposes, is dead, is gone. They know he's not dead, but you know, he's left, he's not powerful anymore, he doesn't have this like hold over people, this fear. So that's why everyone was celebrating and talking about Harry. But obviously Dumbledore and McGonagall are on the street for a different reason. They're not celebrating, they're really concerned, they're really sad that Lily and James have died, and obviously they're talking about like, how could this boy have led to such an event? So at this point, a half giant man, so absolutely huge, bearded, large man, comes flying down the street on a flying motorbike, and his name is Rubeus Hagrid. Again, all these people will come into play more later on, we're only at the start of the story. And he says he's borrowed this motorbike from Sirius Black, and he has rescued Harry from the wreckage of the house, essentially, because the house basically blew up. So he has little baby Harry in his arms, and that's what Dumbledore had asked him to do, and that's why they're all meeting on this street, because they're going to have to leave Harry at the Dursleys, as they are now his only remaining relatives, essentially. So he is going to have to grow up with them as the only family that he now has. And McGonagall's been watching them all day as the cat, and she exclaims about this. She's like, they're horrible people, you know, they would not want anything to do with magic at all, you know, I don't think this is the right place for them. But Dumbledore says it's the best thing to do, essentially. This is what we're going to do. And they leave Harry there, and Petunia finds Harry on the doorstep the next morning. So we then skip forward 10 years later. So Harry's like 10 pretty much at this point. And Harry is really badly treated by the three Dursleys. You know, they barely feed and clothe him. You know, they do the bare minimum to keep him alive, basically. And they just treat him as a servant around the house. You know, he cooks them all breakfast. He does anything that they need to do. There's no sort of love or affection or kindness in the household towards him at all. But they don't on Dudley, their obviously biological son. They absolutely love him. He's become even more spoiled, even more mean. You know, he really bullies Harry. It's just not a nice environment at all for Harry to be in. And Harry actually sleeps in the cupboard under the stairs. That's where his bed is, whereas Dudley has 2 bedrooms upstairs, one for his sleeping and one to keep his overflow of toys and computers and anything that he wants, basically. So you can pretty much summarize the dynamic in that household there. On this particular day, it's Dudley's birthday, and he has so many gifts, but is obviously upset he didn't get as many as last year. So they promise that they'll buy him more when they go out for his gift for the day. Meanwhile, they've always ignored Harry's birthday. He's never like got anything ever. Now, Mrs. Fig, who's a neighbour, an elderly neighbour, was going to babysit Harry for the day while they took Dudley and his friend Piers Polkiss, off for their activities. But Mrs. Fig says that she's broken her leg, tripping over one of her many cats, and they can't find anyone else to look after Harry. They don't trust him to be left in the house on his own, so he ends up going to the zoo with the two Dursleys, Dudley Dursley and his friend Piers Polkiss, who's just as mean and horrible as Dudley is. While they're at the zoo, Harry goes over to look at a snake and he notices that it winks at him, and obviously he finds this very bizarre, but he seems to understand everything that the snake is trying to get across to him in body language, and he feels like he can speak to this snake. And so Harry starts speaking back and kind of emphasizes empathizes, that's the word, with the snake's life in captivity, and kind of feels like he leads a very similar life, and neither of them are treated particularly well. Bit of an assumption on the zookeepers, maybe they treat him really well, the snake really well, I don't know. I've never been to London Zoo actually, but Piers, Dudley's friend, notices that the snake is kind of behaving weirdly and calls the whole family over to look at the snake. And Dudley runs over and elbows Harry to the floor and peers into the cage, and obviously Harry is irate about this, and next thing he knows, the glass of the cage has completely disappeared and the snake escapes, kind of not harming anybody but obviously causing a lot of havoc. People are running around, screaming, jumping up onto things, and Harry is so confused how the glass could have suddenly disappeared, as are the rest of the Dursleys. So the family goes home, and by the time they're home, Dudley's telling stories of the snake trying to bite him, and Uncle Vernon is furious and sends Harry to the cupboard, although Harry is confused how they think it's his fault, he had nothing to do with it. So that night, while he's locked in the cupboard, he kind of ruminates on his parents and thinks about their memory, and his aunt and uncle have always told him that his parents died in a car crash, and that he was in the car crash, and that's how he got the lightning bolt scar. And when he kind of thinks really hard, he can remember a flash of green light, and he imagines that must be the moment that the car crash happened. And he kind of gets a faint pain in his scar as well, so he imagines again that must just be a phantom memory of the pain that he felt in the car crash. And he's always dreamed of leaving the Dursleys, some unknown relative coming into the house and taking him away, and him getting to, live this life, just a nice life, not even an exceptional life. And, some people on the street before have recognized him somehow and known his name and shaken his hand, but he's never actually had someone come and take him away. So he just kind of ruminates on this weird life that he's had. So one morning in the summer, the post comes, and as usual, Harry's the one who's forced to go and pick it up from the front and bring it in. And he notices that there's quite a fancy looking letter addressed to him, which is completely unusual. He's never once in his life had a letter sent to him. And the odd thing is, it actually says, to Harry Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. So it's not even they know where he lives, they know where he sleeps. So it's very strange. So Harry brings all the letters through to the kitchen. He's kind of, trying to open his when it gets snatched off him. And Vernon and Petunia are really unsettled by this letter. They seem to know something that Harry doesn't, and the letter is destroyed. Whatever it is, they do not want him to look at this letter. And because it says the cupboard under the stairs, yes, I'm wearing pajama trousers here, they're concerned that they're being watched, obviously, because they know where Harry sleeps, but they just decide to ignore it and hope that the issue will go away. That is a common theme in Harry Potter, is ignore it and it will go away, and guess what? It never does. So that night, they actually move Harry from the cupboard under the stairs into Dudley's second bedroom. They're like, here you go, you can have your own room once and for all. And obviously Dudley isn't thrilled about it. Harry couldn't care less, to be honest. He's like, okay, he would rather have his letter than, a brand new bedroom. But that's where he sleeps. And the next morning, another letter, the same one, arrives to Harry. And this time it says to Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive, etc., etc. So they're tracking him somehow. The letter was once again destroyed. Harry tries to sneak down early the next morning to get the letter before anyone else is awake, but Uncle Vernon beats him to it and was actually sleeping at the front door, so he was the first to get it. That's how much they don't want Harry to get one of these letters. So in the following days, dozens of letters arrive. It's the exact same story over and over again, but Uncle Vernon makes sure that Harry doesn't get a single letter. Finally, it culminates in hundreds of letters flying, through the windows, through the fireplace, all over the house. It's a famous scene in the films. You've probably seen it even if you've never seen the films. And Harry attempts to snatch one and open it so he can finally see what's in this letter, but Vernon pushes them all out the house and exclaims that they are going away for a while to escape these letters. So they spend an entire day, the whole family, driving around the country, turning in odd directions to shake off whomever Vernon thinks is following them. And they end up spending the night at a really cheap hotel, but more letters to Harry are sent to reception there, so they're still being tracked. They continue their journey the next day until eventually Vernon finds a shack in the middle of the sea, and he's confident no one will get him there, so that is apparently where they're spending the night. They have to get a little rickety boat there, but that is where they're spending the night. So that night at midnight, Harry actually turns 11 years old. It's his birthday, and he's never felt lower. He wants nothing more than to get this letter, and he doesn't think it's going to be possible. And all of a sudden, there's a massive crash at the door of the cabin, and a large figure stands in the doorway. And that figure, moving my notes down, turns out to be Rubeus Hagrid, who we've met before, the half-giant. And he introduces himself as groundskeeper, or officially keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. And the Dursleys are obviously terrified of Hagrid, who is huge, and they just cower in the corner of this shack, while Harry's a little bit braver. And Hagrid introduces himself to Harry and seems pleased to see him. He's even brought him a birthday cake. He knows it's his birthday, and Harry relaxes. This is a kind person from the looks of things, even though he's so huge and, scary, I suppose, in the first instance. And Hagrid is astonished that Harry has never heard of Hogwarts before, and explains that it's a school of witchcraft and wizardry. His parents were magic, they were a witch and wizard, and Harry is a wizard himself and obviously has a place at Hogwarts, and that's why he's come to see him, and that's what the letters were for, to tell him you have your place at Hogwarts. And then Hagrid finds out that Harry doesn't even know that magic was a thing, and is furious at the Dursleys for keeping this from him. He feels like it's a right that he should have known that he is magic. And the Dursleys defend themselves, believing that, the magic would leave Harry if they ignored it. They don't like magic. Petunia doesn't like that her sister was magic, and obviously they like things that are normal and safe and all this kind of thing, so they really don't like that sort of magic side of things. So they thought, we'll just ignore it, we won't tell him, and it will just go away. And Hagrid is enraged that they told Harry as well that his parents died in a car crash, and Hagrid tells Harry that his parents were killed by a dangerous wizard, as we know, and this wizard's name is Voldemort, and nobody likes to say his name. Hagrid doesn't like to say it. Everyone calls him you-know-who, but his name is Voldemort. Now at this point, Harry's got so much new information that he's also really annoyed at the Dursleys for not telling him all these things, particularly for not telling him how his parents died. Essentially, that's quite an important piece of information. And Harry learns that his parents were famous as a result of their death, and consequently so is he. He is famous for being the boy who lived, essentially. And Petunia at this point mentions that she hated her sister and was jealous of her being magic and all the attention that she got, and that's part of the reason why she just never really spoke to her sister anymore. So Harry finally gets his letter from Hagrid and finds out that Albus Dumbledore is the headmaster of Hogwarts and Minerva McGonagall is the deputy headmistress. At this point, Hagrid tries to take Harry away so he can get himself ready for Hogwarts, but the Dursleys won't have it. And Hagrid basically says, shut up, and uses magic from his umbrella to give Dudley a pig's tail. And the Dursleys freak out, and Hagrid asks Harry not to tell anyone that he did that because he's technically not allowed to do any magic. And Harry's like, sure, whatever. And they leave. So Hagrid takes Harry into Diagon Alley, into London, which it is a wizarding street full of magic shops, essentially, so only wizards can see it. And they start at the Leaky Cauldron, which is a pub at the top of the street, and Harry is instantly recognised by everyone in there, and they want to shake his hand and say thank you, and it's just really an experience that Harry has never had before, and he finds it weird that he's only just discovering this world, and everyone in it seems to already know who he is. He's also introduced to Professor Quirrell, who is the Defence Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts. He wears a turban and seems like a really nervous guy, like he's constantly stammering, he just seems very in himself and, very nervous to talk to anyone. From there, they move on to Gringotts, which is the Wizarding Bank. The bank is huge and opulent and is run by goblins, and Harry finds that his parents actually left him a massive fortune of money, which is great because it means that he can buy all his school supplies and he's set for life, basically. They also stop at a vault requested by Hagrid, who takes out a small, mysterious little package and tells Harry that it's Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's asked him to pick it up, but he can't tell him what it is or what it's for, and they leave it at that for now, but Harry certainly finds that strange, and I would find it strange too. They then shop along Diagon Alley, getting everything that's on Harry's school list of supplies, you know, cauldrons, textbooks, that kind of thing. And Harry goes into Madame Malkin's to get his Hogwarts robes. He goes in by himself, and inside meets another first-year Hogwarts student called Draco Malfoy. And Malfoy is like immediately stuck up and seems to know everything there is to know about Hogwarts. You know, he's obviously comes from a wizarding family and really knows what he's getting himself in for, whereas Harry doesn't. He mentions school houses and that he wants to be a Slytherin and would rather die than be put in Hufflepuff. And before Harry can even really introduce himself, he's done, you know, Draco's talked this entire time. So he goes out to meet Hagrid outside. And Harry mentions the school houses to Hagrid, and Hagrid tells Harry that most bad witches and wizards have come from Slytherin. So, you know, instantly there's like an off vibe about Malfoy, according from Harry's perspective, for wanting to be put in Slytherin. And Hagrid says, you know, there's nothing wrong with Hufflepuff as a house at all. And Harry in that moment really hopes he's not put in Slytherin because of what Hagrid said, but also just from not getting a good vibe from Malfoy at all. And Malfoy had also in the conversation mentioned purebloods and how they should be the only ones who should get into the school. And purebloods are people who have a mother and a father, or whomever composition of parents are both wizards, compared to someone who's maybe only got one parent that's a wizard, or no parents that are wizards. They're the first wizard or witch in their family. And Hagrid tells Harry that that's nonsense. You know, it's a really old-fashioned way of thinking, and all those on the school list are, you know, capable witches and wizards, and, you know, no one person is better than anyone else. So Harry decides he really doesn't like Draco Malfoy very much at all. So Hagrid and Harry then go into Ollivander's, which is a wand shop, and he tells Harry that the wand chooses the wizard. Is really up to the wand which one he ends up getting, and that they try a few and they don't really work until one wand, which is just perfect for Harry. He can just feel it in that instant, this is my wand. And Ollivander tells Harry that this is actually really interesting because the core of his wand is a phoenix feather, and the specific phoenix that gave that feather only gave one other to a wand, and that wand is owned by you know who, he who must not be named, Voldemort. So it's at that point that it seems that Harry and Voldemort are tied together in more ways than one. There's some kind of fate aspect to it. You know, they've both got these rare wands, essentially. So once they're done with that, Hagrid gets Harry a birthday present, a snowy owl called Hedwig, so that's basically his pet now. And Harry is completely chuffed about this, and Hagrid explains that in the wizarding world, post is sent via owls and parcels and things like that. So it's really useful to have your own pet. You could also have a rat or a cat, but Hagrid felt like this was the most useful pet for Harry to have, so he's now got his little sidekick, little Hedwig. Before they finish for the day, Hagrid gives Harry his ticket to get on the Hogwarts Express, which is the train that will take him from London up to the Scottish Highlands, which is where Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is. And September the 1st, that's when Harry will get the train, and with that, Harry heads back to the Dursleys for the rest of the summer. So on the very last day of August, because Harry always likes to cut it fine, Harry asked the Dursleys if they would take him to King's Cross, and they're hesitant. They obviously don't want to do him this favour, but say that they're going in anyway to the hospital to help Dudley get his tail removed, his pig's tail, so they'll drop him off anyway. And Harry mentions he needs to go to platform 9 3/4 to get his train, and they love this because they know there's no such thing as platform 9 3/4, so they are keen to take Harry to the station and basically abandon him for this platform that doesn't exist. So once Harry gets to the station, he realizes that the Dursleys are in fact correct, and that platform doesn't exist. And, you know, he asks a member of staff, but they have no idea. They've never heard of the platform. There isn't even a train that leaves at that time. So just as Harry is starting to panic and think, what do I do? Why didn't Hagrid give me more information? He hears someone talking about muggles, and Harry recognizes that word because Hagrid explained that a muggle is someone who's non-magic, just an ordinary person that has nothing to do with magic and doesn't know that magic exists. So Harry knows that these people are wizards if they know this word and are talking about muggles. So he makes his way over to them and finds a woman there with lots of children with her, and all of whom have bright ginger hair, including the woman. And he introduces himself and asks for help getting onto the platform. And this woman is lovely, and she explains that you have to run at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. And Harry is very skeptical. He does not want to run into a brick wall, but goes for it and suddenly finds himself on platform 9 3/4 with the steam train Hogwarts Express right in front of him, and it's a really busy platform with lots of witches and wizards and animals all over the place. While getting onto the train, Harry meets two of the children, twins called Fred and George Weasley, and their mother is concerned that they'll get into lots of antics this year. They're clearly troublemakers, and they promised their younger sister Ginny Weasley, who's not going to Hogwarts this year, she's too young, that they'll send her a Hogwarts toilet seat. So their mother, Molly Weasley, is not happy about that. She's also fussing over Ron Weasley, who's going to Hogwarts for the first time too. He's in the same year as Harry. And finally, there's their older brother, Percy Weasley. He seems quite pompous and self-important. He's been made a prefect, and he won't shut up about the fact that he's a prefect. But that's the family that's there. And they all generally seem really nice and, try and make Harry a bit more comforted and welcome. So Ron ends up sitting with Harry in a compartment in the train, and Ron soon realizes who Harry is. He comes from a wizard family. He's heard of Harry before. So he's really interested in Harry's story, but Harry is just as interested in Ron's story. Someone who's grown up knowing about magic his whole life. That's really interesting. And he learns that Ron's family struggles with money and that he has two older brothers as well. So there's Charlie, who studies dragons in Romania, and Bill, who's in Egypt working for Gringotts Bank. And Ron says that it basically sucks being in a big family because you always get everything second hand, including his rat, Scabbers, his pet, which was Percy's and now is his. And Harry expresses his nervousness to Ron about not knowing anything about magic, and he's going to be really behind, but Ron reassures him that loads of people come from non-magic families and everyone pretty much starts at the same point, and they get on really well and end up becoming friends. And during the journey, they're visited by the trolley lady, who offers them sweets, and Harry spends his money buying one of every sweet because he's now rich and he wants to try everything. So he and Ron bond trying all these sweets. And Harry tries a chocolate frog that comes with a collectible card, and he gets one of Dumbledore, who has lots of accolades, so it kind of talks a little bit about that. And Harry learns that in the wizarding world, pictures move, and the subjects walk in and out of the pictures they see fit. So there's all these little details about the wizarding world that he's sort of slowly learning about as being different from what he knows. A boy comes into the compartment upset at some point. His name is Neville Longbottom, and he's lost his pet toad. And the boys unfortunately tell him, we haven't seen it. And soon after, a girl comes in with frizzy hair called Hermione Granger, and she's helping Neville look for the toad. She doesn't realise Neville's already been in, so she asks them if they've seen the toad, and they're like, we've already told them, no, we haven't. And she sees that Ron is about to do magic. He's going to try and turn Scabbers yellow and wants to see, and unfortunately nothing happens. And Hermione mentions that she's been practicing spells and they've all worked. She's basically had a 100% success rate. And of course, Hermione tells Harry that, she's heard of him because he's been mentioned in lots of books, which Harry is shocked about that he's mentioned in a single book. But Hermione comes off quite overwhelming and makes the boys quite nervous. She's so prepared. She's done loads of prep and reading and done loads of homework, even though they don't have homework yet. And when she goes, Ron mentions that he hopes he's not in the same house as Hermione. When they're speaking of houses, Ron also mentions that everyone in his family has always been put in Gryffindor, and he's worried about being put in another house. There's so much pressure on him. And Harry also hopes at that point he gets put into Gryffindor because he just wants to be in the same house as Ron, basically. And Draco Malfoy then comes into the compartment because these boys cannot catch a break and get a second to themselves, and he has two cronies with him, Crabbe and Goyle, who are basically like his bodyguards. And Draco now knows that the boy he met was Harry Potter. So Draco wants to make friends with Harry because he obviously wants to be friends with the people who are powerful and, popular and in the know. And he feels that Harry could do better than being friends with someone like Ron. So Harry isn't too happy about this and basically tells Malfoy to get lost. And Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle try to steal the sweets, but Scabbers bites Goyle and sends them all off running. And Ron mentions to Harry that Draco's family were involved in the dark arts and were involved with Voldemort when he was powerful. And then when Voldemort lost all his powers, they were like, oh, we were bewitched, we had no idea what we were doing. But Ron is like, that's not true, they knew exactly what they were doing. So basically just confirming that the Malfoys, or Draco Malfoy, is a bad egg. So the train reaches Hogsmeade Station, and the first years are met by Hagrid, who takes them onto boats and leads them across to the lake to Hogwarts. And it is a massive castle, really imposing, but it's, you know, it's got a really cozy vibe, cozy lights, it's huge, but it feels very welcoming and magical, ironically. So they get inside and they're greeted by Minerva McGonagall. She welcomes them to Hogwarts and tells them that they are about to go into the Great Hall where the other students already are and be sorted into their houses, which is basically like your family when you're at Hogwarts. And she fully explains the housing system finally, so Harry finally knows what on earth everyone's talking about. And there are 4 houses. There's Gryffindor, which we later learn sort of values bravery and courage, and is represented by the colour red and a lion. There's Slytherin, which values cunning and ambition and is represented by green and a snake. Ravenclaw is represented by blue and an eagle, make it make sense, and values knowledge and that sort of like desire to learn. And then Hufflepuff values loyalty and hard work and is represented by yellow and a badger. So those are the 4 houses you can be sorted into. So very nervous, they walk into the Great Hall, which is a massive room with 4 long tables, one for each house, and at the top is another long table where the staff are sitting. And the roof is bewitched to look like the sky outside. You know, there's clouds, there's floating candles as well that cover the ceiling. It's so cool. And, oh, I hiccuped. Oh, I hope I don't hiccup throughout this whole video. We'll see how things go. Anyway, they're told that they have to put on a sorting hat, which will basically just read their soul essentially, and will tell them what house they're meant to be in. So Hermione and Neville, who we met on the train, are both put in Gryffindor, and as is Ron, which his brothers are obviously really happy about, and Ron is happy about to be in the same house as his brothers. Draco is immediately put in Slytherin, so he gets his wish, and Harry goes up, and the sorting hat really isn't sure whether to put him in Gryffindor or Slytherin. He says he could essentially be in any house, but really Gryffindor or Slytherin is what he's unsure about, and Harry thinks, please not Slytherin, please not Slytherin, and the hat's like, okay, if you don't want to be in Slytherin, I'll put you in Gryffindor then, which Harry is very chuffed about. So Dumbledore as headmaster gives a speech welcoming everyone back to school and mentions that students are not allowed in the Forbidden Forest, in the grounds it's too dangerous, and nobody for the first time is allowed on the 3rd floor. And that leaves everyone very confused, but he doesn't really reiterate on that. You're not allowed on the 3rd floor. So while they're eating and having their dinner, Harry meets Nearly Headless Nick, which is the house ghost for Gryffindor. And his head was nearly fully chopped off, but it's still like barely attached to his head. That's why he's called Nearly Headless Nick. And Nick shows him that there's also the Fat Friar, which is the ghost of Hufflepuff, the Grey Lady, who's the ghost of Ravenclaw, and the Bloody Baron, who's this really like creepy looking ghost who is the ghost of Slytherin. And there's also Peeves the Poltergeist, who's always trying to cause trouble and is really only scared of the Bloody Baron. He's like the only one who can put Peeves in his place. They have a fantastic feast before they're taken off to Gryffindor Common Room, which is at the very top of one of Hogwarts towers, and it's very cozy and a big fireplace. It's just really warm and relaxing. And Harry shares a dormitory with his fellow first-year Gryffindor boys, and they each get a 4-poster bed, and he falls asleep that night happier than he has ever been. So Harry is settling well into Hogwarts, but isn't used to getting as much recognition and everyone looking at him all the time. You know, most people, they know Harry, they know what happened, so they're like, look, it's Harry, you know, that kind of thing. And he and Ron are really just busy trying to find their way around this massive castle and kind of settle into their life in Hogwarts. And, you know, there are secret corridors and the staircases move and vanishing steps. And, you know, the castle in this really is a character in and of itself. You know, it is alive, really. Harry also struggles with Argus Filch, who's the caretaker. He is always in a bad mood and is always threatening to lock everyone up who's not behaving, lock them in a cupboard or hang them by their ankles. And he's always followed by his cat, Mrs. Norris, who always looks like she knows more than a cat should, you know, and everyone always feels like she sees something and then somehow goes and manages to tell Filch, like, you need to go upstairs because students are misbehaving. And Harry has lots of classes, including, you know, studying the night sky, herbology, where you look after magical plants, history of magic, which is taught by a ghost, Professor Binns. Professor Flitwick teaches charms, McGonagall teaches transfiguration, and Hermione is the one who really excels in classes in their class. She knows the answer to everything, she gets everything right, she learns everything really quickly. There's also Defense Against the Dark Arts, but the students don't really enjoy that as much because Quirrell just seems to be scared of his own subject. He's not particularly a great teacher. So Harry eventually gets a letter from Hagrid asking him to come down and see him in his hut to see how things are going Ron and Harry look at their timetables and realise they have double potions for the first time that day with the Slytherins, so they'll go after that. And Ron explains that the teacher of potions, Professor Snape, is head of Slytherin House and favours the Slytherins. So while we're talking about heads of house, McGonagall's head of Gryffindor, Flitwick's head of Ravenclaw, and Sprout is head of Hufflepuff. That doesn't really come up all that much, but it's just good to know. So they go down to the dark dungeons to their potions class, and Snape seems to hate Harry from the get-go. You know, he calls him out on when Harry doesn't know the answers. He calls him out for relying on being famous and arrogant and thinking he can just get away with not reading any of the course material, even though none of them have read the course material yet, apart from Hermione. So it's just a not very nice experience in potions class. So at the end of the day, Harry and Ron make their way across the grounds to visit Hagrid in the hut, and when they enter, it's really small and cozy inside. And they chat with Hagrid, and Harry mentions feeling like Snape hates him, and Hagrid's like, don't be silly, that's not true, but Harry kind of feels like Hagrid's maybe lying a little bit. They notice a newspaper, the Daily Prophet, on Hagrid's table, and it says that there was a break-in at Hogwarts on the day that Harry and Hagrid visited. And Hagrid won't say much, but Harry can kind of figure out that they were probably looking for what Hagrid had taken out of that vault earlier that day, so it's obviously something really important. So Harry's settling into Hogwarts, and as he kind of continues his life there, he finds that he hates Draco Malfoy more and more. And Malfoy is constantly teasing and bullying Harry, just trying to make life as difficult as possible for him. And that morning at breakfast, Neville gets a package from his grandmother, and it's a Remembrall, which turns red when you've forgotten something. His grandmother thinks this is something that would be useful for Neville, and Malfoy comes over to check it out and steals it from Neville, but luckily McGonagall comes along, breaks up the situation, and Neville gets his Remembrall back. That afternoon they have their first Quidditch lesson, and Harry is instantly a natural, as it turns out. You know, he finds it easy, he loves being on a broomstick, he feels like this is something that he was born to do. Neville, however, has a hard time flying and ends up losing control, falling off and injuring himself. So Madame Hooch, she has to take Neville up to the hospital wing, telling everyone, you have to stay on the ground while I'm gone, I will be back. Of course, Malfoy doesn't care, and he notices that Neville dropped his Remembrall when he fell, picks it up and flies off into the air, and Harry is having none of it. So he gets on his broomstick too and flies after Malfoy, saying, give it back. And Malfoy is kind of like a little taken aback. This is the first time Harry's ever been on a broomstick, and he's doing really well, as it turns out. So Draco flies off on his broom with it, and Harry chases after him and manages to catch the Remembrall. When Malfoy throws it, he goes and catches it. Unfortunately, McGonagall was watching this whole time and calls Harry down, and Harry is sure he's going to be expelled. He's explicitly broken a rule that a teacher gave him. But instead, McGonagall takes him to see a fellow student, Oliver Wood. And it turns out that Oliver is Quidditch captain for Gryffindor House. I'll get to Quidditch later. And McGonagall wants Harry to be on the team. And it turns out that Harry's actually the youngest seeker in a century. That's his position in Quidditch. Again, I'll go over this later. And normally first years aren't even allowed on the house team. So McGonagall has really made an exception for Harry. So Malfoy actually finds Harry later on and is gloating because he assumes that Harry has been expelled, and Harry and Ron take a lot of glee in correcting him and, tells Malfoy, you're a lot braver on the ground. So Malfoy is really annoyed that Harry's basically been rewarded for this and challenges Harry to a duel, and Harry and Ron accept, agreeing to meet Malfoy later that night. So they sneak out of the common room that night and make their way to the trophy room where they're going to duel, but they come across Hermione on the way. She overheard the conversation earlier and asked that they don't do it because they could get in trouble and could lose Gryffindor house points. But they go anyway, and Hermione follows them out being like, no, you shouldn't go, you shouldn't go. But she's gone too far, she turns around and she is locked out of the common room. So she basically has to go with them. They also come across Neville in the corridor. He's forgotten the password to get in, so he comes along with them too because he doesn't like being stuck out in the corridor. So this motley crew all head to the meeting point, but as they're waiting for Malfoy, they hear Filch coming towards them. They try and sneak away, but Neville completely runs into a coat of arms, making a huge amount of noise. So they sprint and yell, trying to run away. So obviously Malfoy has set them up, told Filch they were going to be there, and he never had any intention of showing up for this duel. So to avoid Filch, they run into a random room and realise, uh-oh, we're on the 3rd floor, which is exactly where we were told not to go. And in front of them is a massive 3-headed dog snarling at them. So they scream, they run away, manage to find their way back to the common room. And Hermione noted that she saw that it was standing on a trapdoor. You know, that 3-headed dog was guarding something. And Harry thinks that's probably where Hagrid's package is being kept that someone tried to steal from Gringotts. So a few days later, Harry gets his first parcel at breakfast, and there's a note from McGonagall telling him don't open it in front of everyone else and to meet Oliver Wood tonight. So Ron and Harry go upstairs, they open it, and it's a Nimbus 2000, which is a fancy broomstick. Ron tells Harry it's the best there currently is on the market, so they're pretty chuffed. And Harry meets Wood that night, who tells him the rules of Quidditch. So it's played on broomsticks, and the pitch has 3 hoops at either end. And the goal is that the chasers on the team, 3 chasers, get the quaffle into the hoops and score points. There's also a keeper who blocks the goals. There's 2 beaters who have bats and deal with the bludger, which is a ball that can attack players. And finally, there's the seeker who looks for the golden snitch. And the game ends when the snitch is caught, and the team that catches the snitch gets 150 points. So to summarise the Gryffindor Quidditch team, there's the chasers, which is Alicia Spinett, Angelina Johnson and Katie Bell. The seeker is Harry, the keeper is Oliver, and the beaters are Fred and George Weasley. And Harry turns out to be a natural flyer, a natural seeker. He loves the sport, and Oliver Wood is really excited. He thinks the team have a really good chance of winning the Quidditch Cup this year with Harry on the team. We then move on to Charms lesson, where they are learning Wingardium Leviosa. So they're trying to make a feather fly, and they're all having difficulties, but of course Hermione can do it easily, and Ron is partnered with Hermione, and she keeps correcting him. He's really struggling with it, and he gets really annoyed. He thinks she's being really sort of arrogant and know-it-all and that kind of thing. So at the end of the lesson, Hermione actually overhears Ron tell Harry how annoying she is. No wonder she doesn't have any friends, and they see her going off crying. So that night is actually Halloween, and the castle looks great. There's pumpkins everywhere, a massive Halloween feast. Halloween is actually a big deal at Hogwarts. It kind of comes up in all the books. But Hermione isn't seen at the feast, and they actually overhear some of the girls mention that she's been in the girls' bathroom all afternoon. And Ron looks sheepish, but is like, let's enjoy the feast. And at that point, Quirrell runs into the hall and yells at everyone that there is a troll loose in the castle. And everyone freaks out, and the students are sent back to their common room while the teachers try and find this troll because it's very dangerous. So Harry and Ron are heading back to the common room when they realise that Hermione wasn't at the feast, so she has no idea that there's a troll loose. So they decide to go to the bathroom to find her, to tell her, and they can all go back to the common room. But they accidentally, of course, because they have the worst luck ever, run into the troll going into a room. So they think, we'll lock the door, the troll will be stuck in there, we've saved the school, right? But they hear a scream and realise they've locked the troll in the bathroom that Hermione is in. So of course they have to unlock it and go in and find Hermione looking up at the troll in absolute terror. So Harry runs at the troll, attaching himself to its neck, and accidentally sticks his wand up the troll's nose. Ron pulls out his wand, yells Wingardium Leviosa, and the troll's club flies up in the air and hits him in the head. They have defeated the troll. Obviously, it goes on for longer than that, but that's the summary of it. And I love that little motif of, he does actually use what Hermione taught him to save her. The teachers come running in, always late, and Harry and Ron almost get in trouble until Hermione tells them that she was looking for the troll because she wanted to test out her magic, and the boys came in and ended up saving her, which was obviously a lie. Hermione loses house points, but they're all free to leave. And from then on, Hermione just becomes part of their gang. No questions asked. So one thing I forgot to mention, because at the time it just seemed so inconsequential, but Harry, once he got onto the Quidditch team, he got a book called Quidditch Through the Ages to learn about Quidditch, learn about its history and all that kind of thing. And Snape actually confiscated that book from Harry at one point. So Harry's annoyed about this. He thinks he deserves the book back. So he goes to the staff room to try and find Snape to retrieve it. And when there, he accidentally finds Filch helping Snape with a cut that Snape has on his leg, a big cut. And Snape is annoyed about how on earth are you supposed to deal with 3 heads at once? And Harry realizes that Snape must have been trying to get past the 3-headed dog, hence the cut on his leg. And he's trying to get whatever the dog is hiding. So at this point, the first Quidditch match of the season is upon us, and Harry is beyond nervous. It's the first Quidditch match he's ever been to, and it's against Slytherin. It's a big deal. The entire school comes out to watch. And Lee Jordan is the commentator of the match, and he's very biased towards Gryffindor. It's very funny. Slytherin don't play fair. You're probably not surprised to hear that. And The match goes on. I'm not going to go into a play-by-play of what happens in the match, but all of a sudden, Harry no longer has control of his broomstick. You know, it's flying every which way, trying to chuck him off. Nothing he does is helping. Hermione, using her binoculars that she was using to watch the match, sees Snape in the teacher's stand, staring intently at Harry and mouthing something like a spell. So Hermione runs off and secretly sets a fire to Snape's robes, which is very hard to say, and obviously he flails about, he knocks over near all the teachers in the stand and manages to put the fire out, and luckily his eye contact has deviated and Harry's broomstick calms down and he's able to get back on it. He rushes after the snitch and ends up catching it in his mouth, but it still counts. Gryffindor wins. What a victory. So Harry, Ron and Hermione go to Hagrid's after the match to give him like a play-by-play, and Hermione and Ron tell Harry about Snape cursing him, and Harry tells them about the conversation he heard with Snape and Filch, and Hagrid is astonished that they know about the three-headed dog, and turns out that the three-headed dog is his and it's called Fluffy, and Hagrid doesn't believe Snape is trying to steal anything and says the only people who know what Fluffy is guarding is Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel, but he won't tell them who Nicholas Flamel is. So they now have this new lead to go off because they're nosy little snots. So Christmas is approaching and Hogwarts is magical, and most students go home for the holidays, but Harry is obviously staying, and Ron, Fred and George and Percy are staying as well because their parents are visiting Charlie in Romania, so won't be in the country. Hermione, because she's going home, tasks Harry and Ron with spending the holidays trying to find out who Flamel is. So they spend a lot of time in the library looking at books. They can't find anything, so assume he must be mentioned in a book in the restricted section of the library, but you're not allowed in there without a note from a teacher, and they know that they're not going to get one. Ron also spends time teaching Harry wizard's chess, where the pieces move for themselves and are very violent against each other. So rather than like a pawn taking a pawn, it will like smash its head off. They have a really nice Christmas together, and Harry is gifted things like a jumper from Mrs. Weasley, and he also receives a package from a mystery person. This whole mystery of who sends him this package is pointless, so I'll just tell you now, it was Dumbledore. And the package says that his father left it to Dumbledore for safekeeping, and it was time it was given to Harry. And it's an invisibility cloak. I don't think I mentioned that at this point. And Ron is astounded. He doesn't know that one actually existed, but if you wear it, it makes you invisible. So that night on his own, Harry decides to test out the invisibility cloak and explore the castle. So he decides, well, I may as well go into the restricted section of the library when no one can see me, and he finds all sorts of creepy books, you know, books that are whispering and emitting gases and, you know, all sorts of things. And he opens one book and it starts screaming like crazy. So that obviously alerts Filch and Mrs. Norris that there's someone walking about the library. So Harry makes a run for it and accidentally stumbles upon a room he's never been to before, because all Harry seems to do is stumble across dangerous rooms. So the room is empty apart from a large mirror, and it's got the mirror of Erised on it. And looking into it, Harry sees his parents and other members of his family, and he can't believe that they're there, and he spends a lot, like the whole night, just looking at them and sort of reveling in the chance to be with his family for the first time. So the next morning, Harry tells Ron about this, and Ron is really keen to show Harry his family, so they go together the next night under the invisibility cloak. But when Ron looks in front of the mirror, he sees himself, as head boy and Quidditch captain, and they're really confused as to why they're both seeing different things. But so Ron is kind of like, that's cool, whatever. But Harry becomes obsessed with this mirror because it's basically the only chance he's got to see and interact with his family, particularly his mum and dad. So he goes pretty much every night to look in this mirror, and as he's sitting there one night, Dumbledore startles him by basically appearing in the room. And Dumbledore doesn't get Harry into trouble, which Harry is worried about, but he explains that the mirror shows someone their deepest desires. So Harry, who's never really known his family, gets to see them. Ron, who's always overshadowed by the accomplishments of his siblings, sees himself sort of standing out by himself. And Harry asks Dumbledore what he sees, and he says he sees himself with new socks. Harry thinks, he's probably lying, but it was a bit of a personal question, so I'll just leave it. And Dumbledore tells Harry that the mirror is being moved to another location, and it would be healthier for him not to seek it out, because people have wasted away their whole lives just looking at this mirror rather than actually living out their lives. So Hermione comes back from Christmas and is disappointed that they haven't discovered who Nicholas Flamel is, so they all just carry on looking through books in the library. And Harry can really only have help because he's now fully engrossed in Quidditch practice. And, you know, the team is devastated to find out that it's actually Snape that's going to be refereeing their next match against Hufflepuff. And the team thinks he's doing this because he wants Gryffindor to lose and is basically going to set up the match. But Harry thinks it's because he's going to try and hurt Harry again and basically wants a closer shot at him. So Neville comes into the dormitory that afternoon with his legs all tied up, and Hermione helps him, and Neville admits that it was Malfoy who did it, and Malfoy is always teasing him and bullying him and making his life a living hell, basically. So they all encourage Neville to stand up for himself a little bit more, and they cheer Neville up, and as a thanks, Neville gives Harry his chocolate frog card, and it's a Dumbledore one again. And reading the back, Harry realises that he's seen Nicholas Flamel's name before. It's mentioned because Dumbledore worked with Flamel on alchemy, and this sort of leads Hermione into a new train of thought. She rushes away, comes back with a book, and realises that Flamel is the owner of the Philosopher's Stone, which gives the holder eternal wealth and life. And they realise that this must be what's being guarded, because it's one of the few things that people would covet that much to risk their lives to get. So the Quidditch match against Hufflepuff comes about, and Snape is being incredibly biased in his refereeing, as you would imagine. But luckily, Dumbledore is actually in attendance at the match, so Snape doesn't try anything, and Harry feels a lot safer. Malfoy, Crabbe and Goyle go into the stands, and they sit behind Ron, Neville and Hermione, because of course they do, and are typically mean in the stands, particularly to Neville. And Neville is spurred on by the conversation he had in the common room earlier and stands up for himself, and everyone's like, yay, go Neville. But it does end up resulting in a fist fight between all the boys involved, apart from Hermione, who's still watching the match, and Harry ends up catching the snitch, and Gryffindor win the match. Harry is the last to get changed, so when he goes back out onto the Quidditch pitch, he's the only one there, and he actually sees Snape and Quirrell walking off into the Forbidden Forest together. So he slowly follows on his broomstick to eavesdrop on their conversation. You will notice Harry eavesdrops 90% of his life. So Snape asks Quirrell if he's found out how to get past Fluffy, and Quirrell says he doesn't know what Snape's talking about, and Snape's like, don't play dumb, you don't want me as your enemy, like, tell me what's going on. And Quirrell seems incredibly nervous and doesn't, I don't know what you mean. So Snape tells Quirrell he needs to think about where his loyalties lie, and off they go. So when Harry gets back to the common room, he tells Ron and Hermione about this conversation, and they conclude Snape is trying to get Quirrell to tell him how to get past Fluffy so Snape can get the Philosopher's Stone, and they don't feel particularly confident that Quirrell will hold his resolve and not tell Snape. They're like, yeah, that dude's going to tell him everything. So the first years and the whole school really start studying for exams, with no one studying harder than Hermione. They meet Hagrid actually in the library while they're studying and tell him that they found out, we know it's the Philosopher's Stone, we know it's to do with Nicholas Flamel, and we also think Snape's going to try and steal it. They just tell him the whole thing. And Hagrid isn't happy that they found this out and doesn't believe them at all. And when Harry leaves, they go to actually look at the section that Hagrid was looking in because they're nosy buggers, and it's books about dragons. So Ron explains that dragons are in the wild in Britain, they are a thing that exists, but it's outlawed to own one. You can probably see where this is going. So they go to meet Hagrid to discuss this and find out that he has actually won a dragon egg from someone in a pub. And Hagrid is absolutely chuffed. He loves animals, he loves dragons, but the three are nervous that he's going to keep this massive dragon in his wooden hut, and he will get in trouble if anyone finds out. So, not to be distracted, they flatter Hagrid until he tells them what else is guarding the stone, because he's very easy to persuade, apparently. And Hagrid basically explains that there's a task set up to get to the stone from every member of staff. So obviously Fluffy is from him, Dumbledore, Quirrell, McGonagall, lots of other teachers, including Snape, all have set up a task. And the group can't believe it that Snape would have set one up. But Hagrid is like, you don't need to worry about Snape. It's fine. Calm down. But they worry that Snape knows how to get past all the tasks. But Hagrid says only he and Dumbledore know how to get past Fluffy. Snape, even if you are worried about Snape, he won't know how to get past Fluffy. So they surmise that this must be the last piece of information that Snape needs, and that's why he's kind of bullying Quirrell to see if he can tell him. So later on in the story, they run down to Hagrid's hut because the dragon is hatching, and Hagrid decides to call it Norbert. And it's already a terror, blowing fire everywhere, but Hagrid absolutely loves it. But unfortunately, they notice that Malfoy was peering in through the window and now obviously knows that Hagrid has a dragon. So they know they have to get rid of the dragon. They don't want Hagrid to get in trouble. Hagrid's really upset, but he agrees it's the right thing to do. So Ron actually arranges with his brother Charlie for Charlie's colleagues to come and collect Norbert from the top of a tower in Hogwarts at midnight. And Hagrid, like I say, is really sad to see Norbert go, but knows that it's for the best and they're going to give Norbert a really good life. So Ron is actually unable to go with them this night because he got bit by Norbert, so has to go to the hospital wing. So Hermione and Harry use the invisibility cloak to go up to the tower to drop off Norbert. And on the way, they no one can see them, but they find that Malfoy has been caught out of bed, out of hours by McGonagall. And Malfoy is yelling that Harry is walking around, he's going to be around with a dragon. And McGonagall's like, that's ridiculous, and tells Malfoy, you've got detention, essentially, for being out of bed out of hours. So the handoff with Norbert goes well, and they run down the stairs really happy with their success, but realise when they meet Filch that they forgot the invisibility cloak up on the tower. They run right into Filch, who takes them to McGonagall. She's obviously furious. She's caught Malfoy in one night, now she's caught Hermione and Harry. She's also caught Neville, as it turns out, because Neville got wind that Malfoy was, out of bed, going to tell on them, and wanted to intercept and catch them and say, look, Malfoy's coming to get you, but unfortunately was caught by McGonagall too. So we've got quite the crew there. A lot of house points are taken off of all of them, and they're also given detentions, and nobody in Gryffindor is happy with the lot because they've lost them so many house points. So Harry is walking along the corridor one day and hears Quirrell in a classroom. And he seems to be talking to somebody, and Quirrell is like, I don't know, I don't want to, and eventually is like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And Harry hears Quirrell leave, rushes into the classroom, but nobody's there. So Harry's like, who was he talking to? So Harry tells Ron and Hermione, and they agree that Quirrell must have been talking to Snape, and he must have told Snape how to get past his own task, Quirrell's own task, and that Snape will be attempting to steal the stones soon. So that night, Draco, Hermione, Harry, and Neville head down to detention, which turns out is with Hagrid, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay. Their task is to go into the Forbidden Forest and find whatever has been recently killing unicorns. And Hagrid mentions that drinking unicorn blood will give the drinker eternal life, but it's a cursed life. So they split into two groups. There's Fang, Malfoy, and Neville, and Hagrid, Ron, Harry, and Hermione. And the forest is a really scary place. Students aren't allowed in there, but eventually they find this injured unicorn, and sparks fly up in the air far away as they find them. So they rush over to the sparks, and it turns out that Malfoy gave Neville a scare. He freaked out, shot the sparks up so that they would come and help him. So Hagrid's not happy. They switch groups. So now it's Malfoy, Harry, and Fang. So they head off again to try and find more unicorns, or find what it is that's been killing these unicorns. They eventually run into a hooded figure who's actually drinking the unicorn blood, literally caught in the act. And they realize, okay, this is what's been killing the unicorns. And then it turns around to look at Harry, and his scar hurts like crazy when he looks at it. It's like he can't see, it's blinding. Malfoy runs away because he's scared, and the creature advances on Harry. But at that moment, however, a centaur rushes in and scares the creature off. The centaur's name is Firenze, and he lets Harry get on his back and is about to go and take him back to Hagrid when the other centaurs come in, and they are disgusted that Firenze would sort of lower himself to be a lowly horse by letting Harry ride on his back. They see that as demeaning. But it turns out that the centaurs are essentially like fortune tellers or seers, and they use the movement of the moon and the stars to kind of see what's coming ahead. And they are really concerned about the figure that Firenze just saw. And with Firenze reveals to Harry that the figure was most likely Voldemort, and he's probably drinking the unicorn blood to try and regain power. When Harry gets back to Hogwarts, he obviously relays all this to Ron and Hermione, and finds his invisibility cloak returned on his bed with a phrase that says "just in case" on it. So the gang get through exams without incident, but Harry's scar has still sort of been aching in the background since the incident in the Forbidden Forest. And he thinks it's an omen that something bad is about to happen, especially now he realises Voldemort is most likely so close by. This actually, thinking about his scar and everything, makes him realise something, and he makes Ron and Hermione rush down to Hagrid's with him, and he asks Hagrid, who gave you Norbert? Who did you play in this match, to win Norbert? And Hagrid says he doesn't know. The guy wouldn't take his cloak off, so he couldn't see him. And this is sus. And it turns out the guy kind of got Hagrid drunk, and Hagrid talked about his job at Hogwarts and that he'd always wanted a dragon, and Hagrid tells him how to get past Fluffy, essentially, and they surmise the guy in the cloak must have been Snape, and now he knows how to get past Fluffy. You have to play music so that Fluffy will fall asleep. Uh-oh. So at this point, they're like, things have got too much. We need to go tell Dumbledore. So they rush off trying to find him, trying to tell him that Snape's going to steal the stone, but they run into McGonagall. And she's not happy that they want to see Dumbledore. And when they tell her why, she's incredibly shocked. She's like, how on earth did you find out all this information? But she tells them, look, even if you wanted to tell Dumbledore, he's not even here. He's had a letter. He needs to go to London to go to the Ministry of Magic for a meeting. And they're like, oh, that doesn't sound good based on what we know. But McGonagall's like, you don't need to worry, like, it's good, just go and enjoy the day. They're not happy Dumbledore isn't there and realizes that Snape is going to use this as an opportunity to steal the stone tonight. So Harry decides, I have to go and stop him, and Ron and Hermione won't let him go alone. They're like, we're going with you. That night they wait for the common room to empty, get the cloak and head out the door, but not before coming face to face with Neville. He doesn't want them going around getting into trouble again. They've already lost so many house points. You know, people were so mean to them in Gryffindor because they lost all the points. So he stands up to them, but Hermione petrifies him, because, like, literally petrifies him, because they're running out of time and she feels really bad, but they need to get Neville out of the way so that they can go and stop Snape. They run to the third floor and obviously encounter Fluffy. The dog is already fast asleep. There's a harp on the floor. They realise Snape has already started making his way through these tasks. Harry takes out a wooden flute that he got from Hagrid for Christmas, didn't mention that at the time, and plays a tune, allowing them all to jump down through the trapdoor, and they land on some kind of like squishy plant. The plant twists around them, tries to strangle them. Hermione quickly manages to get out, but the other two are too intertwined. They yell at Hermione, like, do something, but she's panicking. She realizes that light will get rid of it, but doesn't have any matches, like, to start a fire or anything. And Ron's like, are you a witch or not? He has to remind her, look, you're magic. So she casts a spell and they're freed. And that was clearly Professor Sprout's task. As herbology teacher, she does the plant task. They then come to a room with winged keys floating around and a broomstick, and there's a bent out of shape key suggesting it's been flattened against a wall and caught. So Harry knows that's the key we're going to need to get through the next door. So he uses his seeker skills to fly and catch it and move on to the next room. And that is Professor Flitwick, the Charms Professor's task. The next room is a massive chessboard, and Ron realizes that they have to play as some of the pieces, and as long as they win, they'll be able to get through to the next room. But the problem is it's wizard's chess, which is very violent, as I mentioned before. Luckily, Ron is very good at chess and gets them most of the way through, but the only way that they will checkmate is if Ron sacrifices himself so that they can checkmate the king. And obviously they're not happy about it. They're like, no, it's not worth it. But Ron is like, we have to do this. We have to get this stone. And he does it. He gets hit and he falls unconscious to the ground. And Hermione and Ron realize that they have to carry on. They have to keep going. And that is McGonagall's task, Transfiguration. The next one's easy. It's a troll. It's already been knocked out. They don't have to deal with it. That's Quirrell's task, as we later find out. And the final room is a table with a bunch of potions on it, and it has a riddle. And Hermione loves this. It's a logic puzzle, is what she's good at. But she realizes most witches and wizards don't have that level of logic. They don't have to rely on it. They can use magic. So it's really only someone like her, like Muggleborn, for example, who would be able to solve this puzzle, which she does do, which allows Harry to go through the next door, and Hermione goes back to look after Ron. And this is Snape's task, obviously a potions task. So Harry goes through the next door to find the Mirror of Erised in the middle of the room. This is obviously where it's been moved to, and Quirrell is standing at it, and Harry can't believe it. Plot twist of the century. He 100% thought it would be Snape, and Quirrell finds it hilarious that he thought it was Snape that would be there. He knew he would fly under the radar if he was kind of stuttering and seemed nervous all the time, and this Quirrell is totally different. He is not particularly nervous at all. And Harry's like, but Snape tried to kill me. And Quirrell's like, no, that was me. The Quidditch match, I cursed you. But Snape knocked me over when he was on fire and I broke my eye contact. Snape was actually trying to mutter a counter curse to prevent you from falling off. And Snape refereed the next match to make sure that I wouldn't do anything. And he also says that Quirrell himself let the troll in as a distraction so he could try and get past Fluffy. But Snape figured out what he was trying to do and intercepted him, hence the cut on his leg. And Harry couldn't believe it. Turns out Snape was trying to help him the whole time. So Quirrell is trying to find out how to use the mirror to get to the Philosopher's Stone. This is obviously Dumbledore's task. And a voice from nowhere, like Harry has no idea where it comes from, tells Quirrell, use Harry to get the stone. So he forces Harry in front of the mirror, and in it, instead of seeing his parents, Harry sees himself holding the stone and putting it in his pocket. And at that moment, he can feel the actual stone hitting his pocket. So Harry lies when Quirrell asks him what he sees in the mirror and says he's just won the House Cup. He basically steals what Ron sees, and the voice is like, "Ya lying." So Quirrell actually ends up taking off his turban, and on the other side of his head is Lord Voldemort's face. So that's where the voice was coming from. And Voldemort's face is so scary. It's really snake-like, red eyes. It's quite a sight. So Voldemort informs Harry that after that night when he tried to kill Harry and it didn't work, he became a shadow of his former self. He's basically bodiless. And Voldemort somehow knows that Harry has the stone in his pocket, but Harry obviously won't give it to him. So Voldemort at this point is like, look, you can join my side. You can give me the stone. You can be on my side. We can work together. You're clearly powerful. I'm powerful. And Harry is like, no, you killed my parents, like, I'm good. So Voldemort instructs Quirrell to grab Harry, which he does, but as soon as Quirrell touches Harry, his hands start to burn, like really, really burn. And he tries again, but his skin becomes all burnt and red, and Harry realizes he can't touch me. So Harry grabs his face and Quirrell moves back in pain. And Harry continues to try and hold on to Quirrell as much as possible, but while Quirrell is burning, Harry's scar is so painful at this moment that he actually ends up passing out. So Harry actually wakes up in the hospital wing a certain time later and Dumbledore is above him. And Harry panics. He's like, oh my god, you won't believe what happened. Voldemort, got away with the stone. But Dumbledore is like, it's fine. Dumbledore realised he was being duped halfway on his journey to London and turned around and found Ron and Hermione, Hermione, told him what happened and they made sure they got out safe. And he made his way forward just in time to be able to save Harry. Quirrell died and Voldemort fled, sort of smoky wisp of himself when he saw Dumbledore because he's scared of Dumbledore. And Dumbledore explained that the mirror would only give the stone to someone who wanted it but would not use it. That was kind of the trick to it. And Harry obviously didn't want to use the stone. He just wanted to make sure Voldemort didn't get it, hence why the stone appeared to him. And the stone has now been destroyed. To avoid any issues, it's been destroyed. So Harry asked Dumbledore why Voldemort wanted to kill him in the first place. And Dumbledore says, it's something I can't tell you yet, Harry, but I'll tell you when you're older. The classic, most annoying phrase an adult could possibly say. And Harry then asks why Quirrell couldn't touch him. And Dumbledore says it's because Harry's mother died protecting him from Voldemort. So Harry is sort of protected by love in some way. And this makes Harry cry, which is sad. Harry, ever full of questions, asks why Snape dislikes him so much, and Dumbledore mentions that Snape and his father and Harry's father knew each other at school and really hated each other. But Harry's dad actually saved Snape's life at one point, so Snape hates Harry by association, but has been saving him this year because he feels he kind of owes that debt to Harry's dad. Ron and Hermione end up visiting Harry in the hospital wing. They're both totally fine, and they say the entire school knows what happens, of course. And Hagrid also visits and is really upset. He apologizes. He's like, if I hadn't told Quirrell, Voldemort, essentially how to get past Fluffy, this never would have happened. Harry's totally chill with it. He's like, look, it's cool. And Hagrid gives Harry a photo album he's made with lots of pictures of Harry's mum and dad and family and stuff, which is very sweet. So it's the end of term feast at this point, and Slytherin have the most points, so that places them, they've won the House Cup for the year. The Great Hall is decorated with Slytherin banners. However, in a twist, Dumbledore has some last minute points to give out in the most unfair thing that's ever happened in the history of unfairness. But anyway, he gives 50 points to Ron for such a good game of chess. He gives 50 points to Hermione for sound logic in the face of danger. And he gives 60 points to Harry for saving the world. And he also gives, in my favourite moment of any book ever, 10 points to Neville because, I semi-quote, it takes a great deal of courage to stand up to your enemies, but a great deal more to stand up to your friends. And that's such a banger line, and it's so true. And because of Neville's 10 points at the end there, Gryffindor end up winning the House Cup. So everyone packs up, everyone's passed their exams. Hermione got best mark in the year, of course, and they go back onto the Hogwarts Express to go back to London. And Harry isn't happy at all to be going back to the Dursleys, but he's really looking forward to his next year at Hogwarts. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the entire plot of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I hope you enjoyed. It's a long one, I'm not gonna lie, but there's lots of details, and I'm hoping to do this with the other books too, and there's a lot of things that are set up in this one that will be important going forward. So if I mention something that didn't really pay off, it will at some point, I promise you. But let me know, did you enjoy this style of video, this sort of cozy sit down little chat with me? Let me know. I'd love to know. And if there's anything you think I could change going forward, I want to hear that too. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week. Bye.